This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.
Well, the Beatles and Dr. Robert. Welcome back to Boomer Life here on CIL 650. We're focusing on your health on this episode of the program with two very capable guests, Dr. Paul Zickler and registered holistic nutritionist Patty Smythe, both from YesWellness.com. Dr. Paul, what occupies most of your time at YesWellness.com these days?
Well, I'm trying to keep people well. so I'm establishing sort of the educational component for Yes Wellness to educate people in terms of the choices they make in nutrition and decisions in their life to promote health, and so that they're going to live better and longer and enjoy their life.
And Patty, you're a quite recent arrival to the YesWellness.com team, and of course you have your own practice in North Vancouver as well. So when you have you're contributing to the YesWellness.com effort, are you blogging? Is that mostly what you're doing? Are you contributing to the website and writing pieces, or what occupies most of your time with Yes Wellness?
Specifically with Yes Wellness, it's just blogging for now.
Right.
And I am actually working with the Yes Wellness employees, their team,
Right.
and doing a variety of lunch and learns and working with them on their health as sponsored by the employer. So the team itself is very engaged in their own personal health.
Tune up the team so they can tune up the rest of us.
There you go.
All right. Okay.
Thank you. You said it.
Now, Dr. Paul, Patty mentioned something a few minutes ago, and I wanted to get an MD's take on this because you said quite wisely, I think, Patty, that before, and here we are in September, and we've made the decision, okay, speaking of tune-ups, I think it's my turn. So before going into something that may involve some dramatic dietary changes, accompanied by hopefully a little bit of exercise, a little bit more vigorous activity, is it smart for a person, especially a boomer, to take a moment, go see their family physician, get those metrics, get those bench lines, and perhaps approval to embark on this new episode of wellness?
For sure, because I mean, let's face it, a significant number of us as boomers are on some medication or another, and some of them can be significantly altered by changes in nutrition
Right.
and exercise, and the fact that there may be certain limitations in terms of your medical condition, chronic condition, that would limit you in certain aspects, but everyone's going to benefit. It doesn't matter what stage you're at. And I would be totally ecstatic doing flips in my office if somebody came and said, "Doc, I think I'd like to talk to you about doing some exercise and losing some weight, or have some nutrition advice." I would be ecstatic.
Right, exactly.
And so,
after all those attempts to
Yes.
get people to even think that way, if somebody came in and they brought it up,
yeah, wow.
wow, okay.
Yeah, that would be wonderful, and so that's where you can you're part of the team. Now, I may only have a few minutes with that person, but what I would do in those few minutes is really empower him to continue on with his decision making to do that.
Right.
And then, if he was really involved in doing this decision making for him, is to refer him to someone like Patty.
Right.
And so that he's got this energy now to do this. He's made the decision to get involved, to get to someone that can really guide him and step by step make it so that it would work for him.
Right. And Patty,
her.
you were talking about each person is a separate and individual case, and some of them, when they come to sit down and have that initial conversation with you, some of them will bring medical records and perhaps if there is a chronic situation and a list perhaps of the meds that I'm currently taking, because you need to know that in order to make good recommendations, don't you?
Very much so. Yeah, it's very important to know where people are at.
Right.
Because that's where we start, is exactly where you're at. And we go from there. And where you're at is just fine, but we'll make our steps. So having a really good picture of where you are is really important. And any limitations, some medications will affect, people will come to me saying, "I want to lose weight," but they're on a medication that will make that very challenging.
Sure, yeah.
So those are really important things to know,
Right.
because maybe then the conversation gets moved from weight loss to just health and living well and energy and feeling good and
Right.
mental health.
Okay. Now, of course, a lot of this, as you both of you pointed out on the program today, it's about the 80-20 ratio. Dr. Paul has had a few appearances ahead of you, Patty, but every time you've been with us, Dr. Zickler, you've talked about the 80-20 ratio. 80% of wellness is what we eat. The other 20% is physical activity. That's remarkable, because I'll bet you dollars to donuts, most of us would flip the equation and say it 20% food and the rest of it is exercise or not. Interesting, isn't it?
I think Patty's referral to food as medicine is significant. And if we all perceive it as that, we would spend a lot more attention in terms of what we're actually putting in our mouths.
And there they were, those hundreds of psychologists gathered together in convention in America a few weeks ago, many of them for the first time actually hearing it all put together in a way that made perfect sense. Your mental well-being can be greatly influenced by what you eat.
Absolutely. And the thing is, what the beauty of this is that once you've established them on a path, it doesn't take long, right, Patty, in terms of for them to feel the positive effects.
Right.
And that just keeps them going and saying, God, you know, I do feel a little bit better. I do feel less fatigued. I have a little bit more energy, and I'm doing this and I really enjoy it. You know, that all of a sudden they're converted, aren't they?
Very much so. And you can't exercise your way out of a bad diet.
Right.
You can't. It's just impossible. You can't. It's not going to fix the problems. But as Dr. Paul said, once you get going, you feel better. And I've had clients who will text me or even call and leave a voicemail saying, "I felt like doing something today.
Right.
I actually cleaned my patio," or I had one client, and she was a very high-level professional and a lot of stress, and she actually phoned me and left a voicemail, took the time to do that, and said, "I haven't snapped at anyone in 4 days. I'm just calmer."
Isn't that nice?
And it was just all we had changed was what she was eating and how she was eating it.
Let's talk about that place where we all go. Everybody listening right now goes to the grocery store. They have their own personal choices, but we all go to the grocery store, some of us more frequently than others, but it happens to each and every one of us. So when we get there, these people, they make billions of dollars for a good reason. It's all about strategy. It's all about eye level. It's all about instant gratification. And there's an awful lot of temptation in a supermarket. So rule number one, I would think, is never go to a supermarket hungry. Is that a good rule? Is that where you start with your people, Patty?
Oh, very much so. Never go hungry, and always go with a list.
Okay.
It'd be hard to pick one or the other, but they're both very, very, very important. Never go hungry would probably eke its way to number one. If you do end up there going hungry, just a little bit of advice, quite often there will be samples.
Oh, yeah.
Have 2.
Okay.
And they might not be great, but they're going to put something in your tummy and they're going to satisfy you a little bit. Then go do your grocery shopping.
Okay.
It lets you get over that little bit of a hump.
Okay. So now, what is it that, you were talking earlier about in terms of making dramatic changes to the diet, and it will be for some. A lot of it has to do with sugar and salt, especially in the form of the salt part anyway, of processed foods. They make them that way for a reason, because when you nuke them in the microwave or throw them in the oven 20, 30 minutes later, they taste fantastic because they're half salt, some of them, for crying out loud. But they do that for a reason. Which of the two is a greater enemy to one's well-being, sugar or salt? Or are they on about the same level?
It would be depending on what the person is dealing with health-wise, but if I had to pick one, I would pick sugar.
Okay.
I think sugar is in everything to higher degrees, and if you are in the middle part of the grocery store and you are buying something that's in a package, and if you are reading the label, you'll notice a lot of OSEs, words that end in OSE.
Right.
Those are all the sugars, and sometimes there can be 6 or 7 different
Glucose,
OSEs.
dextrose, fructose, and on and on and on, OSEs.
Exactly.
And that's all sugar. That's
It's
just liquid
all
sugar, right?
Yeah, it's all sugar, and
Okay.
it's really, it just causes all sorts of havoc on your body, and Dr. Zickler can talk more about the actual medical side of it, but sugar it's just causing havoc on so many things and really needs to be watched and eliminated.
Okay, back to the supermarket in a half second, but Dr. Paul, just to follow up on that, it used to be all about fats. Oh, I guess stay away from the fats and the cholesterol and the carbohydrates. But in fact, sugar becomes fat in your system in many occasions, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, the story is more involved than that. Is that sugar certainly affects you metabolically in terms of how your insulin is and your cells becoming resistant to the effects of insulin,
Right.
and thereby making you diabetic. But what we've done in the last 40 years is made a big effort to reduce the number of fats. Don't eat fats.
Okay.
And because that led to heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's really not the case. In fact, what has really been the problem in the last 40 years is the increase in the amount of sugar and fructose, specifically what the OS, that is the real big problem.
That's the big one. Huh?
And that, in turn, is actually the cause of all the increased heart disease problems. And so what happens is that fats satiate us, make us so we're not hungry.
Mm-hmm.
If we spend a whole time trying to make our life low fat, we feel an urge to be hungry and we want to eat.
Right.
So how do you fill that gap? You fill it with sugars. And so that's one of the main reasons. And then what also happens is that the hormones that sort of are fat sort of busting
Okay.
and muscle making are reversed. And so what in fact happens is all that sugar goes directly into fat deposition, and your muscle decrease continues, which really makes the problem much worse, because muscle is what's really the engine that's eating up the glucose.
Right.
So if all of a sudden you're getting a whole pile of more sugars, and the hormone balance in your body is such that it's encouraging fat deposition and muscle loss, you're going to be a wreck, and you're going to be a diabetic, as well as all its ensuing complications. So that's really the major problem is sugars. And fructose is the major culprit, because fructose is directly related to the hormones that are in sort of depositing fat.
Oh, I see. And
So-
so I mean, there's sugar in ketchup, there's sugar in peanut butter, as you said, Patty. There's sugar in everything, even stuff we wouldn't imagine there being sugar in. Well, there's sugar in that too. That one of those OSEs.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really important to both of you when a person decides to take control, become an empowered human being, and make some good decisions on their own, make some good choices. They really need to start reading labels. It's as simple as starting to read the labels. Do you encourage your clients to do that, Patty?
Very much so, with the long-term goal that they will be eating foods that do not have a label.
Right.
But step one, yes, would include reading labels, very much so. And they're very confusing, and they can be hard to disseminate. There has been new legislation in Canada that are positive changes to the label that food makers need to put on, but they do have 5 years to do it. So in the short term, we're still dealing with our confusing labels. And I would always encourage people, because the little box with the percentages and the grams
Yes,
and that sort of thing,
right.
that's a bit of a study unto itself. But I always encourage people to actually read the ingredients first. If you're picking up something that has an ingredient list, start reading it.
Right.
And when you get to the ones that you can't pronounce, really think, do I need this?
Just look for OSE at the end of the
OSEs.
word, right?
How many OSEs?
Right.
Can I pronounce it?
Right.
Red dye number 3, I don't really want to eat that. You know, like anything that's got like a sciencey name
Mm-hmm.
is not food to me. And if it's got 27 ingredients. Do I need to eat it? And it slows people down enough that they can really connect. Do I need to eat this? Can I buy an alternative?
Okay. Need to take a break here, but just to wrap up the sugar thing for the moment. Apples and other natural sugars occur. You encourage, and you were just going on about how it's imperative that people who make these changes, Patty, eat fresh, natural, whole foods. Well, some of that has natural sugars in them, and I would assume those are the good sugars.
There are good. You still need to manage it. You really want to get a lot of your natural foods from the vegetable side and the lower glycemic index berries with the skins and lots of very nutrient high and a little bit lower in the sugar side.
Okay, we'll take this break and then come right back. Our guest from YesWellness.com, Dr. Paul Zicler, and registered holistic nutritionist Patty Smyth on Boomer Life here on CIL 650. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.